Hi everyone, welcome. So what I've got out here is a couple of bins that, if you've been following along, you'll recognize them already because of the unusual configuration with this plastic top here and some of the food clearly visible and the weird tattered coverings. These are the bins in which I've got my African nightcrawlers. And the main issue that I've been combating now for some time in these bins is a little bit of a mite infestation. A whole bunch of these little tiny white mites that have made themselves at home in here. And, I actually surprised myself when I started rolling back through the old videos, at which point I started acknowledging the issue and tried actively trying to combat the matter. It goes back months, basically. And part of the countermeasures that I've been applying to try to deal with the situation was, just trying to leave the plastic coverings that I traditionally use off the systems to allow for evaporation. Hopefully drying the systems off a little bit because, damp conditions are often a place where mites really thrive. I tried applying various types of materials, some of these white powders, such as lime. The lime would normally help reduce acidity. Some diatomaceous earth, which is usually something that helps combat insects. I've even been withholding food from these systems for what's pretty close to 4 weeks now. I think it's around 26 days and counting. So 2 more days, it's going to be 4 weeks since these bins have not been fed any fresh food. Other than these little bits of cantaloupe that you see in here. The cantaloupe is what I've been trying to use to lure the mites out of the systems. And I started into this cantaloupe baiting thing about, I don't know, maybe about 8 days ago, I believe. Today's Sunday. It was Friday of last week, Friday. So yeah, almost 10 days now. And on each occasion, not every single day, but each time we checked in here together to see how things were coming along, I would take the bait and I would take the bait over to my sink and flush off any mites that had gathered on there. And I've been repeating that process almost daily. Like even today, I skipped a day yesterday, so last time we checked in on these bins was 2 days ago. But almost daily, with the exception of just a couple occasions, I've been coming in here, flushing the mites off, resetting the bait, letting things continue. And now I'm starting to feel like I'm finally seeing a little bit of progress. At least in this system here, in the Vermibag tote, we had been observing that it seemed like possibly the number of mites have been getting somewhat less and less as time goes on. And it might have something to do with the fact that the material in this bin did seem significantly drier than the material in this bin. Possibly just due to the fact that it's a fabric container that probably, airs out a lot easier. So I'm just down here to do what I've been doing normally. I just figured I'd give a little bit more of an intro as to what's happening here today. Mainly because I do feel like there's finally some improvement showing in the Vermibag tote. So we're going to take a closer look at both of these systems today. Flush off mites as we've been doing. Do a reset. Even if it's maybe not so critical here anymore. I'm thinking I do see some mites, but it'd be kind of cool if we didn't. It's hard to tell, so I'm going to get up close, take all these coverings off so we can actually examine what's happening here better, and then take whatever next steps seem appropriate. So let's get started. All right, we're going to begin here in the Vermibag tote, where it does appear that things might be in a slightly better condition than in the other system. Again, probably due to the fact that the material in here has been somewhat drier over time. And I was wondering what the heck was going on here. The plastic was tipped up so high, and it seems like the worms have almost all come together in one spot for some reason. And, if I had to guess, I would have to guess that the reason is moisture. Because even though I, during the last visit in on this system, I did add a fair bit of moisture. I even, rummaged around within the container and sprayed water down into the material to give it a good soak down. I guess we're still in a situation here where the worms are still feeling a little bit of distress within their environment and seeking out more moisture. So my hope is that at some point soon I can start restoring the plastic coverings that I normally use, which sort of force the recirculation of the moisture in the system. Not so much the recirculation, but perhaps more importantly, prevent the evaporation of that moisture. So the bait, you know, I feel like I can see some mites. There's a little congregation of them there. A few pieces on the pineapple. Besides the melon, I've also been using pineapple too as bait. But I thought that I had seen mites on the paper, but it might have just appeared that way through the plastic. The plastic kind of distorts the view of what you're seeing a bit and makes it a bit hard to see what exactly it is that's right there in front of you. But, you know, I do believe there are mites on the paper too. So like I've been doing on a fairly regular basis, I've been rinsing not only the bait off, but I've also been rinsing this piece of paper beneath the bait off, where it also seems like some of the mites gather, and it seems like there are more mites right here on the bottom surface. I'm just wondering if we might be able to allow just the bright lights overhead to cause these worms to leave the paper. I'm not sure if that would work or not. I could see if they were right on top of material that they could burrow straight down into, but whether they'll climb off of here due to the bright lights, I'm not sure. It still seems like I'm probably better off trying to, you know, somehow scrape them off if possible. Because, I mean, if I go over to the sink and give this thing a flush, the worms are going to go down the drain with the mites, and that's not what I'm really after here. And I mean, I'm not opposed to permitting a little bit of collateral damage here and there. And as sad as it may seem, if it means the loss of a few worms in the process, it will be a shame, obviously, but something I'm willing to live with. So I'll do what I can to get the majority of these little guys off of here. But I believe that the next stop is the sink, where a number of these little guys might find themselves down my sewer drain. And who knows, maybe someplace where they can find a new home. I really don't know what's at the end of that sewer drain. Obviously lots of moisture, which I'm sure they wouldn't really object to. But at some point I would assume they would have to be able to get out of that water and go someplace else if they want to continue to live. I don't know how well worms would do just being submerged under liquid indefinitely or for an extended period of time. All right. It looks to me like we've gotten pretty much all of them off. I guess my efforts have paid off. It also seems like if I can kind of roll them a little bit to make them lose traction on the paper, and then I give the paper a little shake, they come off pretty easily. So I've actually succeeded in evicting them all. There's one more here on this other side too. All right, so onto the sink to get rid of our pest issue. And then I guess these little guys are probably going to take shelter from the light while I'm away. Maybe I'll just let the camera roll and we'll get to see what happens with these guys over the next few minutes while I'm away. Alright, so I've returned from the sink with all of our bait station components rinsed off. And you know, we're not here to see worms burrow down into their bed, as much fun it is to watch. But I wanted to try to excavate this bait station a little bit more, because if the worms keep pushing everything up and tipping that plastic up, so many worms, then it'll just, be airing, ventilating. And I'd really rather have the plastic that I'm covering up with pretty much remain resting on the surface and not allowing air to flow in and out, and thereby allowing for evaporation to occur. So I want my bait station to be a little bit submerged under the surface here to see what we can do in terms of maybe rounding up a few more mites here, but it definitely did look like we've observed a good amount of improvement here in this system in terms of reduction of mites. Because the same way the worms are, kind of driven to a frenzy to collect around the moisture, the mites are very much the same. And the fact that we saw so few mites collecting here, I believe, could be a sign that the end is near as far as our mite infestation goes. So I think this might be the greatest effort I've made so far to make sure that the plastic is sitting flush on the surface of the material in the bin. So here we're going to allow the process to continue, but it almost seems like there's not going to be much of a need for it to continue for much longer, because there were not that many mites, neither on the paper nor on the bait. So at some point soon, we might be able to actually say that the baiting of the mites in this system is done, let things get back to normal. And in this bin, getting it back to normal might actually mean starting to drive the bin towards harvest, because the material in the bin is full of just nice castings everywhere. I mean, admittedly, there's a bunch of residual scraps of bedding and stuff laying all over the place. But as far as residual food, I would be very surprised if there was anything significant remaining in here as far as leftover food. So the next time this bin gets fed, I'm sure they're going to be really, really happy about that. Because these worms are probably starting to get pretty hungry and starting to get pretty desperate for some food. So yeah, it's good progress here, I must say. So the next bin we're going to check on, I know, has mites in it for sure still. So let's get that one up here. Alright, so now in this system, I don't think the moisture level is quite as dire. Because like I said, we did pick through these systems the other day to get a closer look at what was happening. And I think I did add moisture to both systems, since I had the squirt bottle handy anyway. But in this system, we definitely observed a great deal more moisture in it than in the Vermibag tote. So here too, I'm starting to see a pretty good sized gap developing over here. And I wonder if it might also have something to do with worms pushing their way up to try to get at moisture. Perhaps not so much. We always seem to see a lot more mites in the system and not as many worms coming for the bait or the moisture. And I see mites on here too. Normally I don't rinse this plastic top, but I think in this case we could do so here as well and do away with a number of additional mites in the process. So right away you can definitely see that this piece of bait is definitely got a lot more mites hanging out on it, that's for sure. A good number of them right along this edge, and a number of them right there on that part of the edge. And then let's see how the pineapple is performing. In certain cases we had started seeing the pineapple also attracting a good number of mites. And, there are mites on it for sure, but maybe not quite as many. But here too, the paper has got little pockets of mites hanging out on it. Perhaps not so much drawn to the material as a food source, perhaps more as a place to go get a little bit more moisture. And here I do see one little worm. We're going to return down to the system, but no other worms adhering to any of this stuff, which is a good sign. So we're going to do the same here. Going to go ahead and give this stuff a rinse, and we'll reset when I get back. Okay, here the lighting is a little bit better than my laundry where the slop sink is, but the mites usually rinse off quite readily, so I don't worry too much about missing any. But I figured let's take a closer look before we do a reset here in case I need to go back and do another quick rinse of anything. But I was pretty thorough. And I guess, you know, here we're not observing that mobbing of worms coming up so much and pushing the bait up and pushing the plastic up and creating excess airflow around the baiting area. But I'm going to do a little bit of what we just did over in the Vermibag tote. Is I'm just going to do a little excavation here and the creation of a little bit of a brim around the edge of where the plastic is going to rest, just so we can, you know, make sure that the baiting station does rest down below the surface. So last time we were in here, this is paper and this is paper. We had just taken the old bait that we were using and we just scrapped it because it was so far gone already. It had been whittled down to just pretty much the skin of the cantaloupe anymore. So that's when I upgraded to a fresh brand new piece of bait here. And here too, I'm sure that the mob of worms around here is here because, you know, maybe because of that little piece of fresh food, that little piece of cantaloupe down there, but it's probably more to do with the moisture that's recirculating under this plastic here. You can see things are drying out pretty nicely out on these edges, but right underneath where the plastic had been, we're definitely observing much darker material, and you know, that's clearly a sign of much more dampness and moisture here. So I'm sure the worms are going to be quite content to remain right where they are, where it's nice and damp and cozy for them. Some of them might even come up for a bite to eat, but in this system it just seems like the bait has been drawing almost exclusively mites and not quite as many worms as we saw over in the Vermibag tote. So seems like we're hitting up against that piece of cantaloupe over there. Perhaps I just didn't excavate a deep enough hole. Or maybe if I put the cantaloupe over here, it's not going to ride as high. And then we've got ourselves our little, contained space here for the recirculation of moisture. Once again, I don't think I've created such a well-sealed moisture spot is what we have right here now. So that's where we stand now. After, I would say, how long has it been, you know? Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So 9 days, I believe, is the actual count on this baiting activity. And in at least one of the systems, we're pretty close to the finish line, if you ask me, on the Vermibag tote. Here, I don't know. Seems like we're making progress, but we're definitely still collecting mites. But it'll be thrilling to see that both of these systems are down to the point where, you know, I could set this station up like this and come back a day or two later and see pretty much no mites on it. Once I reach that point, I'm going to be satisfied that we've tackled the problem and solved it. So I'm so glad that we're finally approaching a resolution to this after all this time of dealing with it. But that's it for today. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please remember to leave me a thumbs up. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, also consider subscribing to the channel too. That's really appreciated as well. All right, everyone, take care. Thanks for watching.